Welcome to the Step Change podcast with me, Mike Foster, the Entrepreneur's Mentor. My podcast is established to help you with your thoughts in the development of your business. And this Step Change podcast is entitled The Entrepreneur's Journey. And in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by two people, actually, Kellie Peters and Regina Lally of Databasix, who are here to join me to share their journey, where we'll explore why they started the business, what they've learned, the highs and maybe some of the lows. So welcome, Kellie. Welcome, Regina.
Hello.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for joining me. I know you've got your own podcast, so I've got a little bit of an example to do. What's the name of your podcast again, by the way?
It's the Data Rockstars Coffee Podcast.
Yeah, and I recommend looking that up on each Monday morning. It keeps me vibrant on a Monday morning whilst I'm doing some prep. So, but first of all, one of you, tell me a little bit more about Databasix and the business.
So this is where Regina and I look at each other to be like, who talks first? So Databasix really was born of Regina and I realizing that we needed a step change from our career, and we wanted to have a little bit more control. And I think it was just a random thought, like a lot of things. Is this sounds like a good idea, Regina? We talked about it for years, but we were just like, we want to do this. What are we really passionate about? And data protection, and in terms of the name, Regina came up with a name of it whilst she was in a car journey. I think you were on the M1.
I was, in the days when we could travel to meetings. I was driving up the M1 for some meeting that I had, I think it was in Leeds, and we've been talking about what we can name the business, and I was going through it all in my head, and then suddenly this whole thing of like the basics of data play on database, and I was like, Databasix. I literally spent the entire car journey till I stopped at the services going, Databasix, don't forget
it.
So yeah, it's been a sort of a bit of a shift in where we started with a focus on supporting people with the idea of managing their data better as a bit of an abstract concept. I think to most people, we were sort of very embroiled in that within our previous positions within the NHS, and looking at quality of data, and moving people away from Excel spreadsheets, which we may come on to in a little while. And that then really shifted with the introduction of GDPR to building on our information governance understanding and that practical use of data and protecting it. And we've translated that into an offering for businesses that builds on our experience working with patient confidential data, but making sure that those principles translate across in a way that's practical and not too burdensome for the business to be able to use data in a way that they should be able to, feeling confident that they're not going to break the law doing so.
Excellent. I love that you've used the word practical. It's something that always resonates with me. I've used your services with a couple of people that I was employed by, and it's always been practical. And I think it's so important because it just converts that, what I can convert as legal jargon, into something practical that I can apply in my business. So why did you become business owners, entrepreneurs? What was that sort of spark?
Speaking diplomatically, let's say,
do that.
We'd worked together since the early 2000s in a small niche part of the NHS that was working as a sort of a consultancy to other parts of the NHS, working with data quality and engaging stakeholders in why it was important. And we'd had quite a lot of support and engagement and autonomy within that organisation to develop good ideas, new initiatives. And then there was a shift in structures, and we were moved into a bigger organisation that was part of the civil service, and there was a very different culture. And we'd got to a point, I think, both of us in our careers, where we were really feeling like we wanted to do something different. And as always, I think it was Kellie's crazy idea,
of course,
that potentially we could take the expertise that we'd both gathered and have an offering that would work within the private sector. And originally we wanted to go back into the NHS and support from an external position, but that's just never really happened, and it hasn't turned out the way we planned. But it was, I think, a desire to have that autonomy that we'd experienced within that smaller part of the NHS back from being part of a bigger organisation where we didn't feel like we had as much control over our decision making and what we wanted to do. And so there was it coincided with the spark of an idea. It's like, let's see if we can do this.
Brilliant. And Kellie, Regina says that you had a crazy idea. Can you remember where you were that moment where you both decided we're going to do this? We're going to take that plunge.
I know exactly where we were when we made the crazy decision. We were sitting in a lounge with my mum because I needed my mum there to make a decision about this. And the conversation was, like, is this something we really want to do? It's going to be a crazy idea. It's going to be very different. So yeah, it was a lounge, me holding my mum's hand, like, is this the right thing to do, mum? And
awesome.
yeah. But yeah, for me, that's I don't know when it was. I think it was like October, probably about 8 years ago now.
Yeah, it would have been. It was 2013, and I think we were discussing the realities of what it'd be like to run your own business.
Yeah. Because I think it was probably about 6 months before that I was on a plane. I think I was flying to Scotland for work. And the idea was like, I don't understand why we can't. Actually, I think my reaction was to something, we could do this better than someone else is telling me they can do it. We've got a good idea. I've got confidence that we could deliver it much better, and I'm not going to sell our souls to someone else.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that, and I can actually envisage that picture that you've just painted about the living room, because that's so important. It was great that two friends came together with a business idea, but also you had your mum there, and it's so important, isn't it, to have those people support us. It's fantastic. For sure. So once you had decided to start, can you remember some of the first things that you did that may be helpful for other people listening to the podcast today? That actually these are probably the initial first steps that we took.
I think we were very fortunate in we were guided with another business partner and our company secretary to really make sure we had the governance of the business set up in place. So not only were we registered with the company's house, but we'd set up board meetings. We've always had a board meeting since the very beginning. So we've always had someone to be accountable to for what have we winning, what's our finances looking like. So that kind of structure, and having our CRM system. We've had a CRM system since the very early days of a business, because they were the processes. So I think and we've evolved since then, but those basic processes of where are you financially, always having your profit and loss, your balance sheet, your forward planning, and reporting to a board meeting, and having those board meetings documented, even though some of those were in a living room in our early days, has always been good. So that our company secretary has always been a kind of a trusted friend that we can seek out advice for, and he has been invaluable to us from the very beginning.
And I think the other thing that we always worked on almost straight away between the three of us, as it was then, was having at least a one-page strategy. Mm-hmm. With sort of a golden thread running through it.
Right, the golden thread.
What our overall business objectives were, what were our values, and then how are we going to set about achieving those. And that was really helpful, because it didn't need to be overly complex, it didn't need to be lengthy, but it made sure that we were all on the same page as we figured out what our service offering was going to be, why would people buy from us, and who we were going to take that to.
Fantastic, and that probably explains why you're so aligned as a team, if you like, is that you have that running through you. And I love that tip that you shared about governance, because I think it's sometimes one of the last things that's on a startups list. So it tends to come and frighten them later. So what's been the biggest challenge then for you in terms of running your business to date? Is it 7 years now? Did you say?
Yeah. So 7 years at full. 7 years since we set it up, 7.5 years, and I've been working 6 years full time. You've just hit probably the 6-year mark as well.
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah,
we had a bit of an overlap where our previous organisation were really accommodating and giving us some flexibility in reducing our hours so we could kind of mitigate the risk of going off a financial cliff.
That's great. It's great. It's certainly a migration, is it, from corporate into your own business, if you've got somebody who can offer you flexible working, all that sort of understanding. Yeah, certainly.
And certainly public sector as well. That's a massive shift away from that security. I think there's been a number of challenges over the years, but certainly I think COVID was an unprecedented challenge that, we've just not seen the likes of that before, and knowing how to respond and react has been difficult.
And I think for me, before COVID, and I absolutely echo that, we were ex-public sector. You don't get trained on how to do a 15-second pitch to somebody. You go into a meeting and you've already won the work, you've got a contract, you've got 3 years to deliver it. It's not the same. So that kind of getting out of that public sector mindset and getting into I need to move into a room and introduce and be very clear about who I am, what the business is, what my offer is going to be, and realize that gets refined over time. And really getting used to putting that sales pitch together was a real shift for us, I think, because we've never done anything like that before. We'd never had any training on that, and we invested in that quite early on because we realized that was a massive gap in us. So I think that the challenge is know what you're not good at and where can you find help to plug that gap.
Brilliant. And we were talking off air before coming onto the podcast, and the work that you guys have done during lockdown, and the catalogue that you now have, blending your services and products, is fantastic. And I encourage anybody who's listening to check out that catalogue that's available on Databasix website. So we talked about the biggest challenges that you faced, and I guess COVID was a big challenge, and for many business owners, you weren't alone. It was probably the biggest challenge for most people. But what's been the best moment of being an entrepreneur?
I think for me, it was probably when we won the Small Business of the Year award.
That was nice.
For the South and Vale Council of those awards. And I think that came off the back of a really hard year of working really, really hard, because it was the year that GDPR was introduced. So it was May 2018, and we managed to have a really good celebration in the middle of the craziest month of delivery as people were working towards that deadline. And just that moment of recognizing that what we'd built up to that point was good, and that we got that award was brilliant for us and for the team that supported us getting there.
I remember seeing you at those awards, actually, and you were glowing with pride. It's certainly well deserved. Yeah, Kellie, did you have a moment that you reflect on in terms of being your best moment as an entrepreneur?
I definitely echo Regina's. I would also say that the moment where we took on our first intern was probably the most scariest thing that we've ever done. And it's not just me and Regina we're paying anymore. Actually, we have to pay for another member of staff, and then to take on a full-time intern from March last year, just before COVID, I think was an exciting opportunity, but also probably one of the most terrifying things. So I was really proud that we'd done that, but also kind of like, oh wow, this is really gonna be a challenge for us. But I was incredibly proud that we made that bold decision.
Brilliant. And certainly taking on your first employees is a step change, isn't it, from that business, for necessarily financial, but also the mindset that you referenced. So,
yeah.
What about tips then? Do you have a tip for other entrepreneurs that you'd like to share?
For me, I'd say if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it needs to be something you're really passionate about. One of the things I struggled with before we set up Databasix was why do I get up every morning to do a job I really love, but I'm not necessarily passionate about the organization that I work for. And that's what really helped make the decision to move in to data and data protection, because it's something that has always excited me. So I do something that you're really passionate about, because when it comes really hard and you have to make some really tough decisions, it will be that passion that will take you forward. And my other tip is, if you get the opportunity to work with someone that you trust implicitly, and I'm very fortunate to work with Regina, that do that. It's a shared burden, which I respect every day. So that's my 2 tips.
Okay, excellent. Regina, do you have a tip?
Yeah, I think for me it's probably be bold and keep the belief. And I think there's a couple of times in the last 7 years where we could have made different decisions, and potentially they might have been easier ones to make. But I think both of us have taken bold decisions at the right point where we needed to, that's resulted in the business being where it is today. And I think that comes from a fundamental belief that we will make this business successful. And I think you will have doubts, and you have times where you'll doubt yourself. But just either get a Kellie or somebody that you trust implicitly to remind you, and there as well at the points that you are doubting yourself, that actually, no, we have that belief in each other, or have trusted friends outside of your business that will play that role for you, because that, we have a little sort of hashtag believe, and it's like, we do believe that Databasix will be successful and what we want it to be, and that's what we have to keep the focus on in the tough times. And I think that's what's kept us going this last year, where it's been immensely tough at some points, but we've taken those decisions, and I think we've come through it, and hopefully coming out the other side now.
Fantastic. I love the relationship you've both got. So is there anything specifically that fuels your motivation? You've touched on it, some of it there, but is there anything specific that fuels your motivation?
I would like everyone to be passionate about data, to be honest, because it drives the world. In terms of all of our decisions are based on data. You may not believe it, but it really is. And I really want people to love data as much as I do, and that's a utopia. I know that, but that's what drives me. A good conversation for me is when a client of ours says, "Kellie, that training was much better than I was expecting it to be. It was much more fun. You really made it practical." That, to me, I've done my job well if I've conveyed a subject that most people feel is dull and boring, and they've got a level of excitement out of that. That's a job well done.
Yeah, I'd echo that for sure. And I think it's putting power back in your own hands, both as an individual and wherever you work within your business. If you've got an understanding of your own data, how you keep it safe, then that will make you more empowered as an individual, because you'll be able to make actually informed choices and know where to look and understand where the risk is. And I think everybody needs that going forward. And I think I get so frustrated by fake news and fake information on the internet. And I think there's an inherent need to actually make sure people are questioning the source of what they read, who it's come from, what's the angle, is it true, and not take everything at face value. And for me, that's linked inherently to what we do. And I think that bit of education, anything we can put out there that helps move that forward, is a good thing.
And we haven't got time on the podcast to explore your fake competition passion, but
that is so true.
I would encourage anybody that is interested in what Regina says about fake competitions and actually what Kellie thinks about Excel spreadsheets is to tune into their podcast and hear a little bit more. Now I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to do in the future. I think you've got a great product range, a great service range. But what do you think that the next year holds for you? Because you're certainly starting to work with some larger businesses now, aren't you?
Yep, and that's really exciting for us. I think some of the work that we've done in the past year, we took time during definitely the first lockdown to really focus on what we wanted the business to look like, and develop products and offerings that we'd wanted to do for a while, but with the constant delivery, finding the time is difficult. So I think for us, we've got a really good platform now for growth, and I think that's really what we want to move towards, is, bringing in more people for the Databasix team to support Kellie and me in delivery, to continue the excellent marketing that both Julia and Neil deliver for us. And I think we've always talked about Databasix towers, and I really want it to be something that's recognized as a fun brand that makes data protection and other data related information understandable, easy to access, and something that people can engage with and have fun as well as learning.
Yeah, and I certainly encourage the listeners to check out your website. So on that note, how do people find out more about you, Databasix, the business?
Wow, so there are many ways that you can do that. So you can go to our website, dbxuk.com. We're on various podcast platforms, which are Google, iTunes, and Amazon.
Spotify.
And Spotify.
Amazon. Yeah, we're on them all.
So listen to our podcast on any of those. We're obviously on the social media channels. We have an Instagram account, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you just look at DBX UK, you should be able to find us on most of the social media. And on LinkedIn, it's Databasix UK, I think.
UK Limited.
Yeah. So we're at social media, podcasts, and our website.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Kellie. Thank you, Regina. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
both joining me for sharing your entrepreneur's journey and sharing some tips, sharing some thoughts, sharing some highs, sharing some lows. Been really useful for the listeners, hopefully. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for listening to my latest Step Change podcast. As always, I hope you found the content interesting, thought-provoking, and useful in the development of your own business. So please do subscribe to my podcast. And when I release my next episode, you'll be one of the first to know.